is to us the super cycle of all super cycles. Now that we're like 2.5 years in, and when I say 2.5 years, I liken the day zero to be the first time I saw ChatGPT, when Sam was kind enough to give a bunch of us a demo of it in October 2022. That was like the light bulb moment is, oh my God, this stuff is real. And there's going to be really exciting stuff built like it, with these models. We've been on that sort of quest to invest in what we think will be those generational companies. And maybe just to take a step back though, if you look back at the start of our firm, Kleiner Perkins, in 1972, the overall GDP of the world was like $3 trillion. And in the last couple of years, we've crossed 100 trillion of GDP of the world. And historically, sort of, it's like continued to rise as a percent. Technology has risen as a percent of GDP to about 15% of that GDP. So about $15 trillion. If we just grew at the rate that historically that tech has grown as a percent of GDP, it will grow from 15 trillion to about like 30 trillion over the next decade. And that's, if the GDP grows from 100 to 150 trillion. And so we look at these really big numbers. So there's like a doubling, like you're creating as much value in tech over the next 10 years as you did total all of tech combined.
Yeah.
But what if tech grows faster because of the tailwinds of AI? And maybe to frame that is, if you look at that 100 trillion of GDP today, 60% of it is labor, human labor. And AI is not just a new way of working, new productivity technology. It's not a new way of consumer apps. There's a strong element of labor.
Doing the job.
Doing the actual work autonomously. And that is a $60 trillion opportunity. You can view it as an opportunity or view it as like, oh my God, what happens to those jobs? I worry less about the jobs because humans are evolutionary and they figured out what to do with these tools. We did it 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago. We did it in the Industrial Revolution. We do it in the computer revolution, the software revolution. We'll do it in the AI revolution. We'll figure it out. But there is up for grabs all this jobs to be done, which are literally trillions of dollars. And, I love looking at numbers and historical charts. And if you look at the market cap, like tech as a percent of the overall market cap of the whole world, like, it's like also roughly actually close to 100 trillion is the overall market cap of all the stock markets. And tech is today about 35% of it. And it's rising pretty actually fast because I think it's already starting to, the effects of AI on how value gets allocated amongst enterprises is already shifting towards companies that are, the NVIDIAs and the Metas and the Googles, and those are Amazons that are benefiting from the AI tailwinds. And so I think the inevitable future is that a lot more of these trillions of dollars is the opportunity for all of us in the venture world. I mean, we're talking about literally like trillions.
So I guess, to state the obvious, your mindset right now is this is going to be an unbelievable period to invest. I'm curious how you think about structuring, the way you're going to go about it. Like if you have to look over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, like how are you logically approaching the situation to invest?
Yeah. So we at the end of the day, we have to break down the problem and then find places and people to invest in at the early stages. That is our business. And so what we looked at is that ChatGPT moment happens. So, okay, so how do we address this market? You can go after the foundation models, you can go after sort of the middleware infrastructure, or there's the application layer. And a lot of us at KP are pretty application centric. And we took a point of view around, let's go think about how we address the applications, the jobs to be done. That $60 trillion, how do we go after the jobs to be done? We took a pretty simple point of view, which is we sort of created like the job pyramid. At the top of the pyramid are highly skilled workers who are highly paid, but they're also fairly scarce in nature. So those are doctors, those are lawyers, those are engineers. And if you look at a chart of the top 20 jobs in the US by pay, those are doctors, lawyers, and engineers. And so we thought, okay, so how do we invest in co-pilots for these job types?
Why co-pilots?
Because at the time, 2.5 years ago, they were still, we're talking about like nascent in terms of what their capabilities were, and over time become more autonomous. But co-pilots, because there are parts of these jobs that are very nuanced, and the human brain needs to process those parts of the job. But there's parts that AI is scribing, or like taking notes as a physician when you're talking to the patient. I saw my wife, who's a physician, take chicken scratch notes and bring them home at night and then transcribe them into her EMR when she was at Stanford. And so it's, every doctor does it. And I was actually a doctor visit this week where the doctor was still doing it. And I told the doctor, like, have you considered using ambience for your AI scribe? And so the point is that you and I could be having this conversation, and this 20-minute conversation gets fully transcribed into the EMR with a diagnosis, with the drugs potentially to prescribe, as well as all the coding that needs to be done for billing for insurance, all happening sort of in the background autonomously. But that's a job that, a doctor doesn't really love doing.
Yeah. I mean, in general, it seems like there's all these conversations happening throughout our days at work, whatever, and we're just losing most of it to the ether. And I could see one day thinking that's insane that we had this conversation and I couldn't recall it or do anything with it because I just forgot about it.
Yeah. And that's the magic of products like granola, right? And so what we decided was, okay, so we invested in ambience for doctors, for clinicians. We invested in Harvey for lawyers. We invested in Windsurf for engineers, and sort of took that sort of layer by layer approach to the different job types. So that pyramid of like highly skilled, highly paid, sort of making 200K a year or so or more, and let's go invest in some co-pilots.
To connect it to Box way back in the day, the way you just described those again felt like you had a plan and you had a view on the world and something should exist, and then you went and found that thing. Is that an accurate sort of way that you go about doing your work and finding these companies? Or is it just they're coming to you and they make sense?
I think it's a bit of both. They come. So the technologists who understand technology and how to use it to build great products. And when the time is right for those products to exist, because the technology is refined enough, mature enough to actually use it for production environments. That's how I think. How do you match technology that's readily available today and production ready to the markets that could exist? In parallel, founders are thinking the same thing. Great founders are. And they're timing the market just like we're trying to time the market. And I think you sort of match each other. They're starting companies and we're looking for them out there. And I think in all those cases, those are founders came to the same conclusion that we did.
Yep.
And they started the companies when they did, and we backed them. Because we thought the time was right.
I guess the future-looking version of the question I asked would be, do you have a set of ideas right now that you are really eager to invest in? If you found the right entrepreneur, you'd be like very leaned in to invest because it's an idea that makes sense to you next.
Taking that pyramid structure again, with that invisible pyramid I'm drawing here, is, okay, so you go one layer below. Okay, what are the jobs that are like slightly less paid but still skilled? Okay, those are nurses, they're salespeople, they're financial analysts, they're jobs of that ilk, still very qualified, college educated. And we found that, okay, well, now some of those parts of those jobs, you can actually just do them completely autonomously. For example, for nurses, we have a company called Hippocratic, which is an autonomous agent that does work that a nurse would do, like make a bunch of phone calls. Like they're making thousands of phone calls today to patients to talk about either like a pre-op conversation, a wellness check, do like a post-op check-in. And by the way, when it turns out that patients like to respond to phone calls in the morning or in the evening, like 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. or before work or 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Well, guess what? Like if you tell a nurse you can only call in those hours, that's pretty hard. But if you can,
an agent can do it.
You can tell them call only those hours,
and 10,000 people simultaneously.
Do it exactly.
Yeah,
that's the beauty of when you create abundance through AI. You can do some pretty amazing things. And by the way, those calls today are probably made. They go to voicemail, and then you don't do a follow up because you just don't have enough humans to make those follow up phone calls.
Yeah, we'll never give up.
AI will never give up,
Yeah.
right? And then that hopefully, or in the fullness of time, creates the right outcomes that these protocols are suggesting. Why should these calls be made is because there's some protocol that suggests if you make the call, you increase decrease the likelihood of readmission by X amount. And so all this abundance in AI creates all these opportunities to just, get to the asymptote of a better world. And so back to your question around like, what are the things that, so this phase of like in the last year or so, like a lot of autonomous agents that are doing parts of the work just completely on their own. And I think the end state is if you go down, so what is the lowest paid work and lowest skilled? It's physical labor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the truth. It's like back-breaking work that people do and still do it. And that's probably the hardest place to attack today. And we're thinking sort of much further out, which is like robots.
Yeah.
It's like humanoids. The beauty of our time was that, the transformers, LLMs, really were able to take all the corpus of the internet, take lots and lots of textual data, transcript data, and understand this corpus and do really well with factual knowledge-based data. But when it comes to the physical world, there is so much more, and no one's fully, digests every single piece of video to understand, or human actions, to solve and address robotics today.
Right.
And I think that's a magnitudes bigger problem to address that a couple of really cool companies are looking at doing. But the problem is bigger,
Much bigger.
And the cost to actually accomplish it in magnitudes bigger.
Yes.
And I just think that's like further down the road for us.
That one could be like investing in grocery in the .com era instead of in 2015. And it's like an obvious outcome, but it's, not there. Like, even setting this room up this morning, like a lot of people had to move a lot of things around to the right place and set up stuff. Doesn't seem physically impossible that a robot could do that one day. It just doesn't seem like we're there quickly.
Yeah, it goes back to the cost equation. And I think you could get a robot, but that robot probably cost you $500,000 to do the work that was done here today.
Yep.
And it would take the robot probably 5 times as long.
Yep.
Okay. And so it's all about the cost benefit or cost equation. And I think we'll get there eventually. We always get there.
Yeah.
But it takes some time.
Seems like that will be, to me at least, that seems like that will be like the biggest economic unlock, and maybe like sort of quality of life unlock imaginable to me. If you could really have humanoid robots doing all that. I mean, it seems like a fantastical idea, but this keeps coming up on the podcast as like the obvious eventual conclusion. And I don't see why it wouldn't happen and why it wouldn't be like the biggest thing that ever happened.
Yeah, I haven't thought of it that way, but just one is that I'm not sure that's the human informed factor. I don't know if you need a humanoid.
Yeah, you're right.
A robot.
But just a robot.
Just a robot. Yeah. Robot, like on wheels, moving around, doing things that we would do. I think we're closer when it comes to moving vehicles, bringing things from point A to point B, like Amazon deliveries, food deliveries, all that delivery type stuff. Right. But things like in factories where there's very confined jobs to be done, we have a company, it's called Dexterity, which unloads boxes off of FedEx trucks or UPS trucks, just like, which is again, like, it does like, if you watch the videos, it does a perfect job of like squeezing boxes into crevices that humans would never think about squeezing a box into. And so if you break the job down into very specific things, like, I think you can already do it today, but I think the very dexterous robot that does a random set of things in your house.
Super far. Yeah, I agree. I'm just very interested in the idea of like how far can prompting go? I think about what type of business might you be able to prompt into existence in 5 years?
Yeah.
Like, could you prompt a simple e-commerce business? Seems like you could probably do that. Could you prompt like a SaaS business into existence, et cetera? And you can like go down the levels of complexity of like what is promptable into existence. But on the robot side, if like one day, 30 years from now, you could prompt build me a house, that'd be crazy. But it doesn't seem physically impossible at some point. I don't know.
It does not.
So I guess you're thinking through this kind of pyramid, and that's informing the way that you go about your investments. I